Hi everyone. Today's story is going to be a lengthy one, so just get ready. There are a lot of details in this case, so I just wanted you to be aware of that. But for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Andrina and I tell true crime stories. And today I'm going to be telling the story of Dee Dee Blanchard. Warning, viewer discretion is advised. On June 14, 2015, sheriff deputies in Greene County, Missouri found the body of Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard, born on May 3rd in 1967 in Chack Bay, Louisiana, face down in the bedroom of her house just outside Springfield, lying on the bed in a pool of blood from stab wounds inflicted several days earlier. There were no signs of her daughter Gypsy Rose, who, according to Blanchard, had chronic conditions including leukemia, asthma, muscle dystrophy, and who had a mental capacity of a 7-year-old due to brain damage as a result of premature birth. Dee Dee Blanchard was born as Claudine Petrie in Chack Bay, Louisiana, near the Gulf Coast in 1967, and grew up with her family nearby Golden Meadow. Blanchard was one out of 5 children. Relatives recalled that she had a habit of stealing from her family, which they speculated was a form of retaliation when things didn't go her way. At some point early in her adult life, she worked as a nurse aide. The family expressed suspicions that in 1997 she might have killed her own mother by denying her food. When she was 24, she became pregnant by Rod Blanchard, then 17 years old. They named their daughter Gypsy Rose because Dee Dee liked the name Gypsy, and Rod was a fan of Guns N' Roses. When Rod realized he got married for the wrong reasons, he resisted Dee Dee's efforts to get him to return. She took her own newborn daughter to live with her family. According to Rod, who remained involved with his daughter at this point by the time Gypsy was 3 months old, her mother was convinced that the infant had sleep apnea and began taking her to the hospital, where repeated overnight stays with a sleep monitor and other tests found no signs of the condition. Dee Dee subsequently became convinced that Gypsy had a wide range of health issues, which she attributed to unspecified chromosomal disorder. At this point, her mother claimed that Gypsy had muscle dystrophy, which made her use a walker. Gypsy stated that when she was 7 or 8, she was riding on her grandfather's motorcycle, and when they were involved in a minor accident where she obtained an abrasion on her knee, her mother stated that the doctors had given her a wheelchair, which she would need to use. Gypsy often went on with her parents to the Special Olympics events. In 2001, when Dee Dee claimed Gypsy was 8 and was actually 10, she was named the honorary queen of the Crew of Mid-City, a child-oriented parade held during the Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Gypsy seemed to have stopped going to school after 2nd grade, possibly even as early as kindergarten. Her mother homeschooled her after that, supposedly because of an illness was so severe that this was later believed to have been an attempt to isolate Gypsy to further her abuse. Gypsy managed to learn to read on her own through Harry Potter books. While Gypsy's father, Rod, had remarried, Dee Dee moved in with her father and stepmother. They would later claim that when preparing food for her stepmother, Dee Dee would poison it with Roundup weed killer, leading to the stepmother's chronic illness during this period. During that time, Dee Dee was arrested for several minor offenses, including writing bad checks. When the P3s began to regularly confront her about the treatment of Gypsy and express her suspicion about her role in the stepmother's health, Dee Dee's left with Gypsy for the New Orleans suburbs of Slidell. Her stepmother's health returned to normal shortly after. In Slidell, she and Gypsy lived in public housing. They paid for their bills with Rod's child support payments and public assistance Dee Dee had been granted due to her daughter's supposed medical conditions. They spent most of their time visiting various specialists, mostly in Tulane Medical Center and the Children's Hospital of New Orleans, seeking treatment of the illness Dee Dee claimed Gypsy had. She now said, including hearing and vision problems. While muscle biopsy found no signs of the muscle dystrophy Dee Dee insisted Gypsy had, she was successfully in securing treatment for her daughter's other perpetrated issues. After she told doctors Gypsy had seizures every few months, they prescribed her anti-seizure medications. Several surgeries were performed on her during this time. Dee Dee regularly took Gypsy to the emergency room for minor alignments. After Hurricane Katrina devastated the area in 2015, Dee Dee and Gypsy left their ruined apartment for a shelter in Covington, set up for individuals with special needs. Dee Dee said Gypsy's medical records included her birth certificate had been destroyed in the flooding. A doctors there from Ozark suggested they relocate to their native Missouri, and the next month they were airlifted there. At first, Dee Dee and Gypsy lived in a rented home in Aurora, in the southwestern area of the state. During the time there, Gypsy was honored by the Ole Foundation, which advocates for the rights of feeding tube recipients, as its 2007 Child of the Year. In 2008, Habitat for Humanity built them a small home with a wheelchair ramp, hot tub, as part of a larger project on the north side of Springfield. To the east, the two moved there. The story of the single mother with severely disabled daughter forced to flee Katrina devastation received a considerable local media attention, and the community often pitched in to help the woman who now went by Claudinia Blanchard, and whom they knew as Dee Dee. The outpouring of support included many charitable contributions. In Louisiana, mother and daughter had the most availed themselves of occasional stays at the Ronald McDonald houses during medical appointments. In Missouri, they received free flights to doctors at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, free trips to Walt Disney World, backstage passes to Miranda Lambert concerts, where she would frequently photograph with the singer, via Make-A-Wish Foundation. Rod Blanchard also continued to make monthly child support payments of $1,200, as well as sending Gypsy gifts and occasionally talking to her on the phone. During one call on her 18th birthday, he recalls Dee Dee telling him not to mention her real age since she thinks she's 14. Rod and his second wife regularly hoped to get to Springfield and visit, but for the variety of reasons, Dee Dee would change plans. She told the neighbors in Springfield that Gypsy's Rose's father was an abusive drug addict, alcoholic who never came to terms with his daughter's health condition and never sent them any money. Many people who met Gypsy were charmed by her. Dee Dee regularly shaved Gypsy's head to mimic the hairless appearance of chemotherapy patients, allegedly telling Gypsy that since her medication would eventually cause her hair to fall out, it was best to shave it in advance. Gypsy often wore wigs or hats to cover her baldness. When they left the house, Dee Dee often took an oxygen tank and feeding tube with them. Gypsy was fed the children's liquid nutrition, Pediasure, well into her 20s. Dee Dee used physical abuse to control her daughter, always holding her daughter's hands in the presence of others. Whenever Gypsy said something that either suggested she was not genuinely sick or seemed above her perpetuated mental capabilities, Gypsy recalls her mother would give her hand a tight squeeze. When the two were alone, Dee Dee would strike her with an open hand or a coat hanger. Medical interventions continued. Dee Dee had some of Gypsy's saliva glands treated with Botox, then extracted altogether to control her drooling, which Gypsy later claimed her mother had induced using topical anesthetic to numb her gums before doctor visits. The lack of salivary glands, coupled with the side effects of anti-seizure medication she was given, caused Gypsy already few teeth decay, to the point the majority of her front teeth were extracted and replaced by a bridge. Tubes were implanted in her ears to control her myriad perpetrated ear infection. A pediatric neurologist who saw Gypsy in Springfield became suspicious of her muscular dystrophy diagnosis. He ordered MRIs and blood tests, which found no abnormalities. "I don't see any reasons why she can't walk," he told Dee Dee on a follow-up visit after seeing Gypsy stand and support her own weight. The doctor noted that Dee Dee was not a good historian. After contacting Gypsy's doctors in New Orleans, he learned that Gypsy's original muscle biopsy came back negative, undermining Dee Dee's self-reported diagnosis of muscular dystrophy, as well as her claim that all of Gypsy's record had been destroyed by flooding. The doctors suspected the possibility of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Dee Dee contrived to gain access to the doctor's notes and subsequently stopped taking Gypsy to see him. The doctor did not follow up by reporting Dee Dee to the social services. He said he had been told by other doctors to treat the pair with golden gloves, and doubted the authorities would believe him in any way. In 2009, an anonymous caller told the police about Dee Dee's use of different names and birth dates for herself and her daughter, suggested Gypsy was in better health than claimed. Officers who performed the resulting wellness check accepted Dee Dee's explanation that she used the misinformation to make it harder for her abusive ex-husband to find her and Gypsy, without talking to Rod, and reported that Gypsy seemed to genuinely be mentally disabled. The file was closed. Dee Dee seemed to have at least one forged copy of her daughter's birth certificate, moving her date up to 1995 to bolster claims that she was still a teenager. Gypsy said in a later interview that for 14 years, she was not sure of her real age. She sometimes claimed that the original had been destroyed during the post-Katrina flooding. Dee Dee did keep another copy with Gypsy's actual birth date. Gypsy recalls seeing it during one of the hospital visits and became confused. Dee Dee told her it was a misprint. Since 2001, Gypsy had attended the science fiction and fantasy conventions, sometimes in costumes, since she can blend into their diverse and inclusive communities in her wheelchair. At the event in 2011, she made what may have been an escaped attempt that ended when her mother found her in a hotel room with a man she had met online. Again, Dee Dee produced the paperwork giving Gypsy false, younger birth date and threatened to inform the police. Gypsy recalls that afterwards, Dee Dee smashed her computer with a hammer and threatened to do the same to her fingers if she tried to escape again. She also kept Gypsy on a leash, handcuffed to her bed for 2 weeks. Dee Dee later told Gypsy that she had filed paperwork with the police claiming that Gypsy was mentally incompetent, leading Gypsy to believe that if she attempted to go to the police for help, they would not believe her. Sometime around 2012, Gypsy, who continued to use the internet after her mother had gone to bed to avoid her tightened supervision, made online contact with Nicholas Godejohn, a man around her age from Big Bend, Wisconsin. She said they met online at Christian Single Group. Godejohn has a criminal record for indecent exposure and had a history of mental illness, sometimes reports as dissociative identity disorder. He also had autism spectrum disorder. In 2014, Gypsy confided to the 23-year-old neighbor, Alaya Godmenzi, who, unaware that Gypsy was closer to her own age, considered herself as a big sister, that she and Godejohn had discussed eloping and even chose a name for potential children. Gypsy, who had 5 separate Facebook accounts, and Godejohn flirted online, their exchange sometimes using BDSM elements, which Gypsy has since claimed was more what he was interested in. Woodmansey tried to talk her out of it, still thinking Gypsy was too young and possibly taking advantage by an online sexual predator. She considered Gypsy's plan just fantasies and dreams, and nothing like this would ever really take place. Despite Dee Dee's efforts to prevent her from using the internet, which went as far as destroying her daughter's phone and laptop, Gypsy maintained contact with Godejohn, who saved printouts of her posts until 2014. The next year, Gypsy arranged and also paid for Godejohn to meet her in Springfield. Her plan was for him to casually bump into her while she and Dee Dee were in a movie theater, both of them in costume, and apparently strike up a relationship that way. And then later for her to introduce him to her mother. As soon as they did meet in person for the first time, Godejohn says Gypsy led him to the bathroom where the two had intercourse. The two continued their internet interaction and began developing their plan to kill Dee Dee. Godejohn returned to Springfield in 2015, arriving while Gypsy and her mother were away at a doctor's appointment. After they had returned home, Dee Dee had gone to sleep. He went to the Blanchard's home. Gypsy led him in the home and allegedly gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife with the understanding that he would use it to murder Dee Dee. Gypsy hid in the bathroom and covered her ears so that she wouldn't have to hear her mother screaming. Godejohn then stabbed Dee Dee 17 times in her back while she was asleep. Afterwards, the two had intercourse in Gypsy's room and took $4,000 in cash that Dee Dee had been keeping in the house, mostly from Rod's child support checks. They fled to a motel outside Springfield where they stayed for a few days while planning their next move. During that time, they were seen on security cameras at several local stores. Gypsy said at that point she believed the two had managed to get away with their crime. They mailed the murder weapon back to Godejohn's home in Wisconsin to avoid being caught with it, then took a bus there. Several witnesses who saw the pair on the way to the Greyhound station noted that Gypsy wore a blonde wig and walked unassisted. After seeing concerning Facebook statuses posted from Dee Dee's account, the Blanchard's friends suspected something was not right. When the phone calls went unanswered, several friends and neighbors went to the house. While friends and neighbors knew the two often left on medical trips unannounced, they saw Dee Dee's modified car still in the driveway, making the explanation of an unannounced trip unlikely. Protective film on the windows made it hard to see inside a low light. No one answered the door, so they gathered friends and called 911. When the police arrived, they had to wait for a search warrant to be used before they could enter, but they allowed one of the neighbors present to climb through the window, where he saw the inside of the house was largely undisrupted, and all of Gypsy's wheelchairs were still present. When the warrant was issued, police entered the house and soon found Dee Dee's body. A GoFundMe account was set up to pay for the funeral expenses and possibly that of Gypsy's. All who knew the Blanchard feared the worst. Even if Gypsy had not been harmed, they believed she would be helpless without her wheelchair, medications, and support equipment like oxygen tank and feeding tube. Woodmansee, who was among those who gathered at Blanchard's lawn, told police that she knew about Gypsy and her secret online boyfriend. She showed them printouts that she had saved, which include his name. Based on the information, police asked Facebook to trace the IP address from which the post to Dee Dee's account had been made. It turned out to be in Wisconsin, and the next day, police agencies in Waukesha County raided Godejohn's Big Bend home. Both he and Gypsy surrendered and were taken into custody on charges of murder and felony armed criminal action. The news that Gypsy was safe was greeted with relief back in Springfield, where she and Godejohn were soon extradited and held on a $1 million bond. In announcing the news, Greene County Sheriff warned that the things are not always what they appear. The media in Springfield soon reported the truth behind Blanchard's lives, that Gypsy had never been sick and was always able to walk, but her mother made her pretend otherwise, using physical abuse to control her. The police would urge people not to donate any more money to the family until investigation learned the extent of the fraud. After the disclosure of how Dee Dee had treated Gypsy, sympathy for her as a victim of a violent murder rapidly shifted to her daughter as a long-term victim of child abuse. While the charge of first-degree murder can carry the death penalty under the Missouri law or life without parole. After her attorney obtained her medical records from Louisiana, he secured a plea bargain to second-degree murder for Gypsy. Gypsy was so undernourished up to this point during the year that she was in county jail. Her lawyer stated that while she was in jail, she had gained 14 pounds, in contrast to most of the clients who typically lose weight in the situation. In July 2015, she accepted the plea bargain agreement, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Godejohn still faced the more severe charge because prosecutors contended that he had initiated the murder plot, and both he and Gypsy agreed, and he was the one who actually killed Dee Dee. He was more severely prosecuted due to the different personal circumstances. Godejohn was granted less sympathy and understanding due to the lack of involvement in the abuse. Gypsy's plea bargain agreement did not require her to testify against him. In January 2017, his trial was postponed when prosecutors requested a second psychiatric exam. His lawyer contended that his intelligence quotient of 82 and is on the autism spectrum, suggesting that he had diminished capacity. He initially waived his rights to a trial by jury, but changed his mind in June of that year. In December 2017, the judge set Godejohn's trial for November 2018. In their opening statement, prosecutor alleged that Godejohn had deliberately for over a year before the crime. His lawyer pointed to his autism and said that Gypsy had formulated the crime and their love-struck client had done as she asked. Next day, prosecutors showed jurors the text message and sometimes even sexually explicit that Gypsy and Godejohn shared in the weeks before the murder, often using different personas, as well as a knife which was used to commit the murder. In some of the texts, he asked for her details about Dee Dee's room and sleeping habits. These were supplemented by video of his interview with police after his arrest, where he admitted having killed her. Gypsy testified on the trial's third day. She said that while she had indeed suggested to Godejohn that he killed Dee Dee to end her mother's abuse, she had also considered getting pregnant by him in the hope that they would once be carrying Godejohn's child. Dee Dee would have to accept him, along with a knife that she would eventually give to Godejohn. She stole baby clothes from Walmart during the shopping trip so she can go ahead with either plan. However, she said Godejohn never told her what he thought about the pregnancy plan. After 4 days, the case was sent to the jury. Jurors had the option of finding Godejohn guilty of one of 3 charges: involuntary manslaughter, second-degree or first-degree murder, or not guilty in any of them. After approximately 2 hours of deliberation, they returned with the verdict of Godejohn was guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. In February 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder conviction, the only possible option since prosecutors had declined to seek the death penalty. Godejohn asked the judge for leniency on the armed criminal action charge, which carries a minimum sentence of only 3 years, saying that he had fallen blindly in love with Gypsy. He received a sentence of 25 years on that charge, which is concurrent with the life sentence. Gypsy is now serving her sentence at the Missouri Chillicothe Correctional Center, did not talk to the media until after she made her plea deal. Gypsy is not serving her sentence in Missouri Chillicothe Correctional Center. Once she was able to talk to the media, she did say that she was able to research Munchausen syndrome by proxy, now professionally referred to as fictitious disorder imposed on another. On prison computers, her mother had every symptom. I think she would have been the perfect mom for someone who actually was sick, she said. She had believed Dee Dee's claim that she had cancer even though she knew she could walk and even eat solid food, leading her to assent to regular head shavings. However, she had always hoped that doctors could see through the ruse, and she was frustrated that none besides the neurologist was able to see it. She was asked about what made her want to escape. Gypsy recalled the 2011 incident as the science fiction convention, which made her wonder why she wasn't even allowed to have friends like others her age. While she said that Godejohn took her idle discussions of murder into reality, she accepts that she committed a crime and has to live with the consequences. Nonetheless, she said that she hopes to help other abuse victims. On June 27, 2022, Gypsy married Brian Scott Anderson. On September 29, 2023, the Missouri Department of Corrections confirmed that Gypsy had been granted parole and will be released on December 28, 2023, after serving 85% of her sentence per state law. Alrighty guys, so that was the case of Dee Dee Blanchard and the story of Gypsy Rose. So as you can see, she is finally going to gain her freedom in just a couple of days. So what do you guys think about this story? She did suffer a long time of abuse, and I think the only way that she thought she can get out of it is to do the unfortunate thing that she did to her mother. I believe that there's also a film that is inspired by what Gypsy Rose went through. So if you guys want to go ahead and look at those, you guys can. I know HBO did a film about that. Remember to always take care, guys. Make good choices. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys on my next one. Bye. Love you guys.